Hello, I'm Kamal Santamaria. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and finance. This week, the spoils of peace. Money is pouring into Colombia these days. Couple that with peace talks between government and rebels. And are we looking at a new Brazil? A Latin American powerhouse emerges. And in the Philippines, they're talking peace too. A similar kind of story, but can it make a meaningful difference to the country's economy? So these are two stories we've touched on in the last couple of weeks on Counting the Cost. This week, though, we're going more in depth with them both by speaking to the country's respective finance ministers. In short, two countries, two peace processes, and the dividends which may follow. Now, later on in the program, it is the turn of the Philippines. Jamila Alandogan speaks to the country's finance secretary, Cesar Purisima, in the wake of the deal signed with the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, the MILF. But we want to start with Colombia, which, aside from the advances it's made with its own rebel group, the FARC, has actually seen some pretty remarkable growth in the last decade. In fact, this year, $17 billion is expected to flood into the economy, most from the mining, oil and gas industries. All told, Colombia is Latin America's third largest economy, worth some $378 billion this year. Now, if we just, and pardon the pun here, drill down into the oil economy alone, you will see how much more potential there is in Colombia. It's aiming to pump out 1 million barrels of oil a day by the end of this year. Current oil reserves are in the region of 2.3 billion barrels, or if it continues to extract at that rate, enough for 7 years. And Bogota started selling off shale gas fields. Now, crucially, these have oil potential as well, enough to raise reserves by a further 1 billion barrels. Now, add into all of that the fact that Colombia is the fourth biggest exporter of coal, and you see it is a nation blessed with mineral wealth. And it could be even more prosperous if it's able to successfully conclude these peace talks with the FARC rebels. Now, up until now, the rebels haven't viewed the mining sector or its players with any great affection, shall we say. In fact, the leader of the group said this: the locomotive of energy and mining, as he called it, is like a demon of social and environmental destruction. Let's put a stop to BHP Billiton, Xstrata and Anglo-American. So let's hear now from the man at the sharp end of Colombia's economy, Mauricio Cárdenas, the Colombian finance minister. He sat down for a chat with Gabriel Elizondo about a possible peace dividend and more.
Mauricio Cárdenas, thanks for this interview today. You have a very positive story to tell here in Colombia. Economic growth last year, almost 6%. That's higher than Mexico, Brazil, the United States, or Canada. And the three main ratings agencies have all upgraded Colombia's outlook. So the obvious first question is, what's the secret here? What's been the magic formula to make this work?
I would highlight 3 points. First, continuity in economic policies. We have 3 different administrations that have basically shared the same views about the importance of low deficits and low inflation. That's fundamental. Second, the improvements in security. Former President Uribe was very important for Colombia in terms of improving security conditions, and we've built on that during this administration. And the third element, it's also a political consensus about the importance of an open economy, not just in terms of trade, but also in terms of capital flows. We will have this year $16 billion in foreign direct investment. That's 5 times what we used to get in the good times in the 90s. So we're very open to foreign investment, and that, of course, has allowed this economy to expand very, very fast.
Unemployment is coming down, but it's still nearly 10%, almost double that of Mexico, for example. How do you see Colombia really reaching its full economic potential, still being straddled by these key deficits?
It is a no-brainer that having achieved macroeconomic stability, the next challenge is a faster reduction in poverty and inequality. Colombia also has very significant inequality, both in terms of income and assets. And we need to tackle that with a very progressive agenda. Taxation to individuals that have high incomes, and social expenditures well targeted to the poorer sectors of the population. So the redistribution agenda is crucial, and it's very central in President Santos' administration. That is a need of Colombia, because if we reduce poverty faster and we have a more equal society, Colombia can reach new heights. We are already growing at 5% per year. We can be growing much faster with more social inclusion. So that's our agenda. But again, under the premises of very responsible macroeconomic policies, which I think is the right way to go.
Colombia is, if I recall, the third largest oil exporter in Latin America. There's some analysts that say Colombia's reserves are only enough for about a decade of production. So where do you go after that?
Sure. It is absolutely true that oil has been a key component of Colombia's economic success. We've expanded our oil production to 1 million barrels per day now. 5 years ago, we produced only half of that. And that has been the result of a tremendous expansion of our own oil company, Ecopetrol, but also of mid-size foreign companies, the juniors, that have played a very important role in the exploration and production of oil in Colombia. We plan to increase our production from 1 million barrels today to 1.5 million by the end of this decade. That, of course, requires very significant investments. We've been very successful in expanding production, but we need more results in terms of reserves. And you are absolutely right that we only have reserves for about a decade. So the big challenge for us is to increase reserves at a faster pace than production, so that by the end of this decade, we've gained 1 or 2 more years in terms of reserves. It's going to take a lot of effort. It's going to take also luck, so that we find new oil reserves. But we're working in a very consistent way in that direction.
As you know, the most important thing happening in Colombia right now is peace talks between the FARC guerrillas and the Colombian government. You're not involved in those peace talks, but you are the finance minister, and you have said that if these peace talks are successful, Colombia could see 6 to 7% annual growth. I think, as you termed, almost Asia-type growth for decades. That's a pretty bold statement. What gives you such confidence?
Well, there are a number of studies that throughout the last decades have explored the question of the peace dividend for Colombia. And all of them have reached similar conclusions, which is that we will be able to spend more on human capital. We will have faster productivity growth. And all of that can result in additional GDP growth between 1 to 2 percentage points. That's more or less the consensus of the existing literature on that topic. So I think that's a reasonable assessment on what could happen. But it's important to say that the Colombian economy is doing very well. The Colombian economy is going through a different phase relative to what happened a decade ago during the previous peace process. It's a stronger economy, and it's an economy that does not require the success in the peace talks to be a successful economy. We're already a very successful economy, and we're not gonna discuss economic policies during those negotiations. That's essentially a political negotiation. Economic policies will be conducted in a business as usual framework. And that business as usual framework is macroeconomic stability, openness to foreign investors, and a very friendly environment for the private sector.
Minister, do you know how much Colombia has lost in economic productivity because of this essential war with the FARC that's been going on for 48 years?
I mean, you can say that we've lost about 1 percentage point of growth per year, and it's been 40 years at least, so it's, could be about 40% of GDP if you accumulate that during 4 decades. So our standard of living could be a lot higher now.
Investors around the world And not only that, but the business community in Colombia are going to be watching these peace talks very closely. What would you tell them right now?
I would just simply repeat what President Santos has said, which is economic policies are not being debated. There is one exception, which is the rural policies, the development of the rural sector. But economic policies are outside the topics of the peace conversations. So we conduct our job here at the Finance Ministry as business as usual. We have clear targets: economic growth, redistribution, reduction in poverty, strong economy, and we're not losing focus.
The Colombian economy is going to be strong no matter what, is what you're saying.
That's absolutely right. Our economy is strong and will be strong no matter the results of the peace process. And there is a complete segmentation of jobs. And my job is a job that is not influenced by the peace process.
The Colombian finance minister there, and you know, one of the things he has to consider when he talks about the strength of his economy is the fact that there is an entire sub-economy which doesn't even use regular currency. We're talking, unfortunately, drugs here. A huge business, and this exclusive report from Carl Penhall you're going to see now really is going to show you what business can mean. It's a new sort of meaning to the phrase drugs money. Take a look.
A peasant farmer grates a ball of semi-refined cocaine. It's more common than cash in this Colombian jungle village. Poor farmers use the so-called cocaine base they produce to pay for everything, including groceries.
Here the common currency in this town is cocaine. If there's no cocaine, there's nothing, and nobody has any money to buy anything.
Jose Sem sells a kilo of potatoes for a gram of cocaine, tomatoes for 2 grams. A single apple costs just under a gram.
These regions have been forgotten by the state for many years. There's been no help to have better legal crops, and the only alternative was cocaine.
If you know where to look, it's not hard to find illegal plantations of coca leaves, the main ingredient of cocaine. The hard part is how to eradicate the crop and stem the drug trade. It's a key point at peace talks between the Colombian government and communist FARC guerrillas. US and Colombian authorities accuse the FARC of wholesale drug trafficking. But rebel leaders say they simply charge smugglers a war tax when they buy cocaine in areas under their control. The guerrillas have publicly called for new policies to help farmers switch to legal crops. In this rebel-dominated corner of Caquetá province, teenager Duran Gutierrez hopes the real payout from the peace process will be better education. He dreams of becoming a vet.
Instead of picking coca leaves, we should be at university or in school. But if you study and there is no work, then this is the only thing you can do.
In a shack, the man they call the chemist begins processing the cocaine base. Omar Vargas says he's made cocaine for 15 years, but he's never tried it.
It's got a lot of chemicals in it. There's fertilizers, bleach, cement, gasoline, so of course it's dangerous for your body. So I'd say don't snort cocaine, it's bad for your body.
After several hours, he extracts the semi-refined cocaine.
Other crops really don't pay well, so we can't earn as much as we can from coca. That's why we all plant coca around here.
Even so, few are getting rich off drug crops. Farmers calculate an average 2-hectare plot will net them only $6,000 profit a year. In the nearest village, a gram of this semi-processed cocaine will sell for around 90 cents. It will later be purified, and by the time it ends up on the streets of New York or London, it will sell for around 50 times more. Unsurprising then that peasant farmers here say that the bulk of the profits from the drug trade end up with the traffickers, not with the growers. Most of the farmers here say they are ready to give up drug crops if the government offers them low-interest loans, better roads and a guaranteed market and prices for legal produce. They hope a peace deal will not only bring an end to the war, but give them a profitable alternative to cocaine. Carl Penhall, Al Jazeera, in Caquetá Province, Colombia.
So now to part two of our program, which looks at the Philippines. There's been a peace agreement between the government and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, looking to end a decades-long conflict. And like Colombia, there are plenty of spoils to potentially go around if this all comes off. The country's economy is worth $225 billion, which is smaller than local rivals, but it is almost triple what it was a decade ago. Unemployment's gotten a lot better too, 6.9% at the moment, down from 14% in 2002. But poverty remains the most critical problem. According to statistics from the World Bank, these are 2009 statistics, more than a quarter of the population falls below the poverty line, with almost 42% earning less than $2 a day. So how does or could peace tie into all of this? Here's Jamila Alandogan speaking to the Philippines Finance Secretary, Cesar Purisima.
Well, I think it's a product of good governance, better governance from before. As a result, our economic growth rate has grown beyond our trend growth of 4.7% the past 10 years. For the first half of the year, our growth was 6.1%. And this we did in a global economy that's really not doing well. And that just shows you that with better governance, the Philippines can really achieve much more. And the hope is that we can sustain this over a long period of time so that we can really make a difference in our people's lives.
How do you make sure, though, Secretary, that this progress actually trickled down to its people?
Well, I think what's important is the rate of change and the direction of change, not the absolutes. No? Obviously, we have poverty, and that's why we're dealing with it. In terms of the challenges for the country, we're addressing it. On poverty, the President has more than tripled the conditional cash transfer program. This is the stipend given to the poorest of the poor so that they keep their children in school and bring them to health centers. This is very important because we're about to hit our demographic sweet spot, which means that the bulk of our population within 2 years will be in working age. And if we are to realize that demographic dividend, it's important that we invest in our people in terms of education and in terms of healthcare so that they live healthy and productive lives.
This economy is still very much highly dependent on foreign remittances from overseas Filipino workers. How do you wean itself off this dependence, considering that this is still unstable with the current global economic crisis?
Well, it's really not unstable. We've proven that it's very resilient. Even through the global economic crisis, it continued to grow. Last year, it grew over 7%, and this year, it's a program to grow over 5%. And it's already over 10% of our GDP. But outside of remittances, we've been able to develop other very strong sectors. We're trying to develop tourism. We're now number 4 in the world in terms of shipbuilding. Our electronics industry is quite vibrant. Before, over 60% of our exports is electronics. Now it's down to 40 because the pie grew. No? We are also very strong in some agricultural sub-sectors. So the key is to really invest in the country so that we can encourage more investments in manufacturing and other areas of opportunity so that in the future, going abroad won't be a necessity, but a choice. And that's the dream of President Aquino.
Secretary, there's been a lot of excitement over this framework agreement that was signed between the Moro Islamic Liberation Front and the Philippine government in southern Philippines. They said that this can actually bring potentially a very big economic, what they call peace dividends in southern Philippines. How big do you think is the potential of Mindanao economically?
Very big. Mindanao, as I mentioned earlier, is the second largest contiguous landmass in the Philippines. The Cotabato Plains alone can probably provide for all the rice that the Philippines will need, provided we have the right investments in irrigation and other facilities. It is very fertile. We produce a lot of pineapples, bananas in that country. A lot of the livestock are produced there also. And with peace, we can open up new areas for agriculture and development. It has the potential to become a major tourist destination. It has the potential for mineral resource development. It can be a logistics area also, being connected with the rest of the region. We can now actually probably give IAGA, which is the East Asia Growth Area concept, a chance to become a reality. This is the growth area involving North Indonesia, North Malaysia, Brunei, and Southern Philippines.
Do you worry also that somewhere along the way there's going to be a lot of spoilers on the ground that are not going to be willing to give up those powers to Bangsamoro? These are political clans, armed groups. They've controlled resources in Southern Philippines.
It's important that we do it properly. We work on the fundamentals and make sure that we execute properly so that it is lasting. I think that given that it's a hard-won piece, we have to work hard to make sure that it works. Clearly, we need to make sure that we invest not only in the economic infrastructure but also in the social infrastructure so that we can prove to everyone that peace is better than war.
Let's talk about mining, sir. Just exactly how big do you think is the potential for mining in this country?
Well, there's been various estimates. The United Nations once estimated in 1995 that we're the fifth most mineralized. There have been estimates of various valuations of how much wealth is underneath the soil of the Philippines, on the ground of the Philippines. One estimate puts it upwards of $1 trillion. No? But whatever that amount is, the goal of President Aquino is to make sure that it is exploited responsibly so that the environment is protected. It is exploited for the benefit of the Filipino people, not just of the mining company. That there are plans to restore the mine so that after the mineral runs out, it is not an eyesore, but is a useful part of our country. And that's why we're revisiting the whole slew of legislation in this area so that we can propose amendments so that we can attain what the President wants, which is responsible and equitable mining.
Sir, let's talk about the South China Sea. How vast do you think is the potential of the Philippines in the South China Sea in terms of resources?
Well, the South China Sea is borders many of our neighbors in the region. It is also going to be at the center of economic growth. As I mentioned, for the next 30 to 50 years, it will be a major channel of navigation. So it is important that the South China Sea is really a sea of prosperity, not a sea of conflict. And I think now, as countries begin to realize that the relationship are multidimensional, that they have trade, they have investment, they have people to people, they have security, cultural, and other types of relationship. It is important that they realize that the sum of those relationships is more often than not more than the sum of their differences. So if you have differences in one area, then you agree to disagree, you agree to work on resolving it.
Would you consider in the future shared exploration with China in the South China Sea?
There are various international rules governing the law of the sea. No? And I think so long as we respect the international laws and it's in accordance with our constitution, then we can continue to exploit whatever wealth is in the Philippines or in the seas near the Philippines.
The Philippines Finance Secretary speaking there. I'm still floating around on Twitter, of course. At Kamal AJE is where you'll find me. And at Abid Oliver Ali is our business editor here at Al Jazeera. You can get in touch with him about the show or drop us an email. counterthecost@aljazeera.net is the address. There is also aljazeera.com/business, which houses the latest business headlines and a link to our page with all the past episodes for you to catch up on whenever you would like. So that is it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Kamal Santamaria. I will see you in a couple of weeks' time. But as ever, the news is next here on Al Jazeera.